In a case that shatters the very notion of family and honor, today we delve into the heart-wrenching story of Shafilea Ahmed, a young woman with aspirations as bright as her smile, silenced forever by the very people who should have protected her. This isn't just a murder, it's a betrayal of the most profound kind, a chilling tale of cultural expectations, forbidden desires, and a family's descent into darkness. Prepare yourself because this story will leave you questioning the lengths some will go to in the name of honor. Hi, guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and on this channel, we talk about true crime. And if today's topic is somewhat of an interest to you, if it's something that you're passionate about, like I am, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, because I really feel like it's important to talk about these cases. I think it's important to share these cases, and hitting the like button really does help out the channel. It's free. It takes 2 seconds and it just helps YouTube push the video out to more people. So I would really appreciate if you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button too. And let's jump into today's case. Shafilea Iftikhar Ahmed was born on July 14th, 1986 in Bradford, West Yorkshire in the UK. Her parents were Farzana and Iftikhar. And not long after Shafilea was born, the family moved to Warrington in Cheshire and went on to have 4 more children: Alicia, Junyad, Mevish, and then one more sister who remains unnamed. Cheshire is a town characterized by a small yet established Asian community. Shafilea was a bright and ambitious young woman who dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Shafilea excelled in her studies and was described as high-spirited and very intelligent. From a young age, she demonstrated a thirst for knowledge and a determination to forge her own path. Her teachers often remarked on her sharp intellect and her unwavering commitment to her goals. She possessed this natural curiosity about the world and a strong sense of justice, which fueled this desire of hers to pursue a career in law. Shafilea's high school years were marked by academic excellence as she consistently achieved top grades in all of her subjects. She actively participated in school debates and mock trials, showcasing her exceptional analytical and persuasive skills. Her teachers and peers recognized her potential to become a successful lawyer, and they praised her for her eloquence, her confidence, and unwavering work ethic. Shafilea's early life in Bradford was characterized by a strong connection to her British identity, even as she remained aware of her Pakistani heritage. She was deeply engaged in social justice issues, often speaking out against discrimination and inequality. Her passion for law stemmed from a desire to fight for those who were marginalized and oppressed, and she saw her future career as a means to make a positive impact in the world. She hoped to become a human rights lawyer one day, and Shafilea had this big circle of friends, and they said she had an infectious laugh and the ability to light up any room with her presence. She was known for her compassion and empathy, always willing to lend a listening ear or offer a helping hand to those in need. Now, to understand what happened to Shafilea, we really need to look at her family, particularly her parents, Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed. Their background is pretty complex and honestly full of contradictions that played a massive role in this tragedy. Shafilea's father, Iftikhar, was a taxi driver and her mother, Farzana, was a housewife. The family dynamics were complicated from the get-go. Funnily enough, Iftikhar's own parents moved him to the UK from Pakistan when he was only 10 years old. He himself had dealt with living in a country whose values did not match the strict home he grew up in. Now, get this, okay? Before he was married to Farzana, Iftikhar was actually secretly married to a Danish Christian woman named Vivi Lone Andersen. They met in Copenhagen in 1980, and they even had a son together named Tony. During his time with Vivi, Iftikhar reportedly embraced a Western lifestyle. He liked dancing, he went to discos, he drank beer, but Vivi noted that his personality would change when his Pakistani relatives were around, like he was caught between 2 worlds himself. His family, especially the male relatives, didn't approve of his relationship with a Western, non-Muslim woman. He faced conflicts with his own parents after falling in love with his first wife. They lived together in Denmark in their own happy little bubble, until 1985 when his mother passed away back home in Pakistan and he went there for the funeral. His relatives were very against his entire choices in life, his marriage, and his son. They pressured him and pushed him into a guilt trip, and something happened there that made him decide to leave his wife and son behind. What happened? He was forced into marriage with his cousin Farzana. Farzana was described as being very traditional and ultra-conservative Pakistani woman. She even threatened to kill herself if he didn't go ahead with the marriage. So it's clear that Iftikhar was forced into this marriage, forced to abandon his wife and his son, perhaps a woman he truly loved. When he arrived back in the UK, he told Vivi he bought a home in Bradford and she should relocate from Denmark to this home. Vivi had no idea he brought a whole new wife along with him to their new home. To add fuel to the fire, his new wife was heavily pregnant with their child. Talk about a shock. Vivi filed for divorce, took their son Tony, and left Iftikhar. It seemed like this traumatic life experience switched Iftikhar into a life following strict Islamic guidance, something he himself never followed in his youth. His ex-wife, Vivi, said the Iftikhar she knew was happy and fun. He was someone who could make anyone laugh and who loved to dance, loved to drink beer. She claimed he was actually very westernized and would have friends that were both male and female. Interesting, to say the least. This was the difference between Shafilea and her friends. She was born in and brought up by one culture, but expected to abide by the rules of another culture, both cultures differing greatly in their values and traditions. This created a difficult situation as Shafilea had different ideas about how she wanted to live her life. Iftikhar's own experience with a forced marriage left him with deep-seated beliefs about the importance of upholding traditional values and family honor. He suddenly believed that arranged marriages were the best way to ensure the stability and well-being of his children, and he was determined to prevent them from deviating off this path. Iftikhar had explicitly stated that if he were to have a daughter, he would not permit her to grow up without strict Islamic guidance. Farzana, on the other hand, seemed to be more submissive to her husband's wishes and played her own role in enforcing these strict cultural norms within the family. Some also credit Farzana as being the one who switched Iftikhar into the strict, faith-based man he never was. But don't get it twisted, because she often acted as the disciplinarian, ensuring that Shafilea and her siblings stuck to the expected standards of behavior and dress. The Ahmed's family home in Warrington was a place of stark contrasts where the traditions and expectations of their Pakistani heritage clashed with the freedoms and opportunities of British society. Iftikhar was determined to shield his children from what he perceived as the corrupting influences of Western culture. He believed that by adhering to strict cultural norms, he could protect his family's honor and ensure their place within the community. Farzana, having been raised in the same way as her husband, accepted her husband's authority without question. She saw her role in the family as upholding the family's traditions and ensuring that her children, particularly her daughters, and she had 4 of them, conformed to the expected standards of modesty and obedience. This created a really tense and suffocating atmosphere within the home where Shafilia's desire for independence and self-expression was constantly stifled. Shafilea was a typical teenage girl. She had that typical teenage rebellious streak. Shafilea's relationship with her parents was further strained by their disapproval of her dreams and her social life. They saw her ambition to become a lawyer as a challenge to their authority and a rejection of their values. Her friendships with local girls and her interest in boys were viewed as scandalous and dishonorable, and they tried to just control every aspect of her life, from her choice of clothing to her interactions with her friends. Up until Shafilea was 11 years old, her life was pretty much the same. She went to school, followed her parents' traditions and rules, but as she got older, she noticed the stark difference between her life at home and life with her friends at school and in public. And as you do, she probably talked more with her friends, saw her friends do things that she wasn't allowed to do. She probably wanted to be the same as her friends. By the time Shafilea turned 15, she was subjected to severe physical and emotional abuse. The abuse included verbal attacks, with her mother calling her a slut for things like dyeing her hair or wearing fake nails. Shafilea had previously shown her friend Sarah her new red hair dye and fake nails that she thought were cute. When Shafilea returned to school a few days later, her friend Sarah noticed her hair was no longer dyed red and her nails had bruises on them from the false nails being ripped off. Her parents were so strict about her social life, who her friends were, and what she even wore. Shafilea had a desire to wear Western clothes like her friends, jeans and a top, and her parents were obviously very against this. So she would wear the clothes her parents wanted her to wear while leaving the house, like Pakistani traditional clothes, and then secretly changed into her jeans and tops later in the day. She would then change back into her Pakistani clothes before her parents picked her up. The abuse began slowly, with occasional punishments for minor breaches of the family's rules. However, as Shafilea grew older and started expressing her own opinions and desires, the abuse escalated in both frequency and severity. Shafilia's teachers noticed bruises, cuts, and other injuries on her body and were alarmed when Shafilea admitted her parents were the cause. Shafilea came to school with bruises on her neck, a split lip, bruises and chips on her nails. Shafilea would have a sprained arm or would sometimes walk with a limp. When she was initially questioned, Shafilea hesitated, but eventually confided in them about the physical abuse she endured at home. She described being slapped, kicked, and even beaten with household objects. The emotional abuse was equally, if not more, devastating, with her parents constantly belittling her, criticizing her appearance, and undermining her self-esteem. The abuse that Shafilea suffered at the hands of her parents was a systematic and calculated campaign of control and oppression. It was not as simple as being strict. They saw Shafilea was bold and maybe a fighter. She was also the eldest. She had to be an example to her siblings. So it was a deliberate attempt to break her spirit and force her into submission. The physical violence left visible marks on her body, but the emotional scars ran much deeper. Her parents' constant verbal attacks eroded her self-worth and left her feeling like she was this worthless and unlovable person. Her parents saw her desire for autonomy as a direct challenge to their authority and a threat to the family's honor. They were determined to crush her rebellion and force her to conform to their expectations. They were particularly concerned about her relationships with boys, which they viewed as a source of shame and dishonor. Shafilea was forbidden from having a boyfriend or even speaking to male classmates, and she was constantly monitored to ensure that she did not, violate these rules. As time went on, the abuse got worse. Shafilea tried to run away from home multiple times, but her parents tracked her down at her friends' homes every time. The first time she was only 12, and in 1998, she ran away with her younger sister. Her parents reported her missing to the police, and eventually they returned home. And the second time was in November 2002 at the age of 16. Her parents again reported her missing to the police, and then later she was found at a park with her bags packed. A month prior, in October 2002, her teacher noticed that she wasn't attending school and discovered that she was being kept at home against her will. At times, her parents would actually kick her out of the house with no food, no proper clothing in the harsh winter, no phone, no money, and her friends would see her in the park, just waiting. She then spoke to her father and then was allowed to return to school. So everything was always based on her parents. Can you imagine living a life like that? Nothing you do is your choice. It's wild. And I know parents are meant to parent you when you're a child, when you're under 18, living under their roof, but this was obviously to a very extreme extent. In February 2003, Shafilea ran away again. This time, she was taken in by social services, identifying herself as homeless. She explained that she was living in fear of being taken to Pakistan and forced into a marriage. In one of her applications for help, she wrote, One parent would hold me whilst the other would hit me. Despite these clear warnings, the system was slow to respond. I mean, she's run away from home how many times now and nothing is being investigated? Police just saw her as this rebellious teenage girl. It's sad that the school also couldn't do more given they had seen clear signs of abuse on her. Not ignoring the fact that her teacher, Joanne, she did actually report her injuries to social services. Shafilia's attempts to escape her abusive situation showed how resilient and determined she was to break free from her parents' control. As the abuse escalated, Shafilia's desperation only grew. She realized that her only hope for survival was to escape her parents' control and find a place where she could actually be safe. Running away from home became a recurring pattern, each time fueled by a desperate desire to break free from this cycle of violence and control. However, her attempts to seek help from social services were met with indifference and a lack of understanding. Despite these clear signs and attempts to flee her home, even verbally telling social services that she was being abused, hoping for some intervention by a third party, no action was taken against her parents. No investigation, really. Now, in cases of honor-based violence, the family is the source of threat, right? So sending a victim back into that environment or trying to get them to talk it out with their abusers is incredibly dangerous. If teachers or other people tried to talk to her parents or even just voiced their concerns, Farzana and Iftikhar cried racial prejudice and Islamophobia. When social workers interviewed Shafilea at home around her parents, Shafilea obviously said everything was fine and she didn't need their help. I mean, this just on common sense factors alone doesn't seem right. They could have very easily spoken to her at school with a teacher present. She found herself trapped in a system that seemed unable or unwilling to protect her from the very real dangers she faced. So eventually, Shafilea began lying to her teachers, telling them, everything was okay at home, terrified of what would happen if she drew more attention to their life at home. Can you imagine what was happening to her after these teachers would call or voice their concerns, or if social workers coming to the house? Can you imagine what she had to deal with? Shafilea even wrote a poem titled "I Feel Trapped," which expressed her despair, her feelings of hopelessness, and even thoughts to end her life. You can pause to read snippets of 2 poems she wrote. I'll insert them somewhere here. It's sad because in these poems, you can see that despite the abuse she suffered at the hands of her parents, those who were supposed to love and protect her, you can see that she is still seeking their love. It's instinctive in a child, right? To seek their parents' love. And it's really sad. Shafilea's fear of being taken to Pakistan and forced into an arranged marriage was a constant source of anxiety. She had heard stories of other young women who had been subjected to this same fate, and she dreaded the thought of being trapped in a loveless marriage to a stranger, far away from her home and everything she knew. Her pleas for help, like I said, fell on deaf ears as the authorities seemed reluctant to intervene as what they perceived to be as, a family matter. When it's a different culture, sometimes people don't want to get involved until it's too late. As Shafilea began to talk to more boys, her parents kept her home more, believing this would prevent her from becoming bad. When Farzana found multiple numbers of boys on her phone, she tried to strangle Shafilea and left scratches and bruises all down her neck. Between November 2002 and January 2003, Shafilea confided in friends and teachers that the assaults were only increasing. In February 2003, Shafilea confided in her friend Mushtaq Bagas that she was afraid of being forced into marriage. Mushtaq told her that he would help her and she could stay in his brother's home in Blackburn. One night in February, after her father locked up the house from the outside and went to work the Friday night taxi shift, Shafilea packed a suitcase with everything she would need and snuck out through a window. Mushtaq took her to her brother's house and then to a bed and breakfast where she may have finally felt safety. Her parents reported her missing and unfortunately she was soon found. After 10 days of freedom, and mind you, Shafilea wasn't just living it up. She would confide in friends how she was torn between her family and living life her way. She missed her siblings, especially her youngest sister, and she wanted to protect them. She really didn't know what to do. So after 10 days, she was walking to school with a friend when Shafilea suddenly saw her dad's taxi driving ahead. She froze and said to her friend Mel, "Oh my God, there's my dad." Mel told her to run, but Shafilea froze, as her dad pulled his taxi up next to them. Shafilea pleaded, "Don't let him get me, don't." But Iftikhar grabbed Shafilea by the arm, and Mel told him to leave her alone. But Iftikhar calmly told her to stay out of it, and he put Shafilea in the car and drove off. Mel ran to the school and reported this to the police, but by the time they arrived at Shafilea's home, her parents had convinced her that there would be no trip to Pakistan, that they would end all her restrictions and she could live her life the way she wanted. Shafilea then told the police that everything was fine now. And she probably truly believed it to an extent because they were her parents. She was still a young girl. In February 2003, Shafilia's worst nightmare came true. Because in her parents' eyes, it was time for her to get married at the age of 17. They forced her to travel to Pakistan, where they planned to force her into an arranged marriage. Marriage would solve all their problems. So you're wondering why she even went with them? Why didn't she throw a fit at the airport? Well, her father went to the doctor a few days prior complaining of insomnia, and he was prescribed sleeping pills. The morning of 18th February 2003, he ground up the sleeping pills and put them in a glass of juice. He then gave the juice to Shafilea. He then took a half-conscious 16-year-old Shafilea to Manchester Airport, where they then boarded a flight to Pakistan. The reality was they had found their daughter a suitor, her cousin, 10 years older than her. The rest of the family joined them in Pakistan a few days later. Once in Pakistan, Shafilea was horrified and vehemently protested against this plan, making it clear that she had no desire to marry someone that she did not even know or love. Her parents, however, were unmoved by her pleas and insisted that the marriage would proceed regardless of how she felt. A few weeks later, Iftikhar returned to Manchester by himself and then claimed a refund on the return leg of Shafilea's plane ticket, meaning they had no plans to bring Shafilea back to the UK. She was going to be married to her cousin and start her life in Pakistan. Shafilea couldn't take it and needed a way out. In a desperate act, she went into her grandparents' bathroom, pulled out a bottle of bleach, and drank it, causing serious damage to her throat and her stomach. Although she survived ingesting the bleach, it was a clear cry for help and a rejection of the marriage her parents planned for her. And it did get her out of Pakistan eventually. Once she drank the bleach, she began screaming and holding her stomach. And, everyone ran into the bathroom and her mother kept telling her relatives, no, everything's okay, she's okay. But they had to seek medical treatment for her. However, her injuries were so bad that her parents traveled back to Cheshire on 27th May 2003 to be treated at her local hospital. When asked by doctors what happened, her parents claimed it was an accident, that she mistook the bleach for mouthwash during a power outage in Pakistan. But the doctors didn't believe them, but again, nothing was done. Her parents denied they ever attempted to marry her off, and they argued that she accidentally drank the bleach, and all of this was an accident. Sadly, Shafilea spent her 17th birthday in the hospital, and she was an inpatient for over 3 months until the end of July 2003. But even after this, she required ongoing medical treatment for her throat. During this time, Shafilea weighed only 31 kilos or 68 pounds. So to put that into perspective, that's usually a 7-8-year-old's weight. Shafilea was nearly 17 years old, or she was 17 years old. She was treated as an object, a pawn in a larger game of family honor and tradition. In this moment of ultimate desperation, Shafilea chose self-destruction over submission. Swallowing bleach was an act of defiance, a refusal to be silenced or controlled. It was a desperate attempt to reclaim her autonomy and assert her right to choose her own path. By inflicting physical harm upon herself, she demonstrated her willingness to endure immense suffering rather than to submit to a fate she found abhorrent. Due to her extensive injuries, the wedding was called off. Shafilea's actions challenged the very foundation of her parents' authority and the cultural norms they sought to impose on her. In their eyes, Shafilea's defiance was an unforgivable act, a blatant rejection of their values and traditions. It brought shame upon the family and threatened to undermine their social standing within their community. Her refusal to accept the arranged marriage was seen as an insult to their honor and a betrayal of their cultural heritage. In their minds, her defiance threatened to shatter the carefully constructed image of their family and would bring disgrace upon them within their community. It was a way of saying that her life and her choices were not theirs to control, which they did not agree with. The failed marriage attempt in Pakistan only made things worse when they returned back to the UK. Tense feelings between Shafilea and her parents were constant. It became unbearable for her at home. They also banned her from returning to school. They just looked to punish her in every way possible. And the way to punish her was by taking away her freedom. Despite the physical and emotional trauma she endured, Shafilea remained determined to pursue her education and build a life for herself. She enrolled in Priestley College in September 2003 with hopes of realizing her dreams, and she also started working part-time at a call center. Her parents even forced her to tell them the PIN to her bank account where she was receiving her money. And then she found out that they began withdrawing 200 pounds of her money a day for ages. And she somehow still had a sense of humor about it. She told her friends, her parents probably spent that money on a new sofa for their house. But her parents viewed her aspirations as a further act of rebellion. Her going to college, her earning her own money, the failed marriage attempt in Pakistan had only intensified, their resolve to bring her under their control. Just as Shafilea began to taste a glimmer of freedom and independence, her parents decided enough was enough. This newfound sense of autonomy only served to fuel her parents' resentment and their determination to bring their daughter back under their control. On September 11th, 2003, Shafilea did not attend college. After a few days, her teacher noticed her absence. Shafilia's disappearance initially baffled her friends and teachers who knew her as a responsible and dedicated student. When she didn't show up at school after a few days, her teacher contacted her parents and her parents just brushed it off, saying, nothing was wrong. She probably ran away again. And if she didn't return home, they would eventually report her missing. This lack of concern about their daughter's well-being definitely raised eyebrows at her college that something was definitely wrong. On September 15th, 2003, Shafilia's siblings, Mevish, Alicia, and Junyad, were privately discussing Shafilia's disappearance. Shafilia's teacher, Joanne, overheard this conversation, and it made her feel sick to her stomach. She knew Shafilea was a straight-A student and someone who loved coming to school. Joanne had also been the teacher that had tried to help her the most, often confronting her parents over Shafilia's absences from school. Driven by her intuition, Joanne decided to report Shafilia's disappearance directly to the police, hoping that a formal investigation would shed light on her whereabouts this time. Now, given that Shafilea had run away in the past multiple times, the police had to determine exactly what type of missing person situation they were dealing with. To start, the police had to visit the Ahmed house. Shafilea had missed her doctor's checkup for her throat, and the hospital did not get a clear reason why from her parents. So an official search was launched on September 18th, 2003, a week after Shafilea was last seen. So it was sketchy from the start. When the police arrived at the Ahmed house and rang the doorbell, it went unanswered for a while. It was clear that they were at home, though. They could hear the family having conversations inside the home. So they went to the back door. And when they did, they heard Farzana coaching the kids to not talk to the police no matter what. They told them to stay upstairs. Finally, Farzana and Iftikhar opened the door, and what the police saw were two blank faces, unemotional about their daughter's disappearance. The only time their expressions changed was if the police asked what Shafilea would have been wearing or if she had a boyfriend. Then their faces would turn to disgust. Also, why didn't they report Shafilea missing? They had done so every other time she ran away, so why not now? Their explanation? The police had informed them prior that since Shafilea was now older than 16, it wasn't their responsibility to find her anymore. So when Shafilea ran away this time, they didn't bother calling the police. Odd? Yeah. But due to Shafilia's history of running away, they couldn't really do much, but it did raise red flags and police began a manhunt looking for any signs of Shafilea. The last time Shafilea was seen was on 11th September on her way to school, and after school she went to work at the call center, and then after this, she was never seen again. Shafilia's disappearance made headlines, and the word "on a killing" began floating around. Her face was plastered on every news station and newspaper in the country. And then her parents' demeanor came into question, with Iftikhar's violent temper being a factor, with many taxi drivers coming forward to tell police about incidents of violence with Iftikhar. One driver told police he had an odd conversation with him where he said, "I know the Lake District like the back of my hand. If you kill a man there, you can't find the body." Now, that's a weird conversation to have with anyone. You can argue it saying, you're just having a conversation about, the best way to murder someone. But at the same time, who talks about an area that they know really well, but in relation to murdering someone and never being able to find the body?
The police are implying those things on you, right, without any evidence.
And suddenly, the once unbothered couple began turning on their crocodile tears for the TV cameras. They gave an interview saying that they were devastated that their daughter was missing, protesting their innocence in relation to her disappearance, accusing the police of racism and targeting them because of their religion.
We just wish somebody could tell us what happened to her. We appeal to the public, if anybody knows anything, to come forward.
However, body language experts claimed Iftikhar made one mistake. When asked if he killed his daughter, Iftikhar said, "Never." But he nodded his head up and down in the yes motion.
Shafelea's father was asked if he'd ever tried to force his daughter into marriage.
No, because the daughter does not want to be married yet. She was still under education. She wanted to make something of herself. Until that such time, she's nowhere near want to have anything to do with the marriage, which is fine.
It was because they were Muslims, he said, that they were being victimized.
That is the attitude they come up with.
Suggesting what?
Suggesting that you Muslim people do these things.
Do what?
Would we kill our own daughter?
And would you?
Never. Couldn't even dream of it.
In November 2003, police set up listening devices in the family's home. They heard the parents discussing DNA in their car, coaching their children about what to say to the police. Iftikhar is heard talking about the system in the UK. He said, "Without proof, even if you sister fuckers kill 40 people, until it is found, they can't do anything to you." At this point, the police were focusing directly on Iftikhar and Farzana. In December 2003, Iftikhar and Farzana, together with 5 other members of their extended family, were arrested for allegedly perverting the course of justice, but they were all released without charge. They were even offered an apology for being arrested without sufficient evidence, which I guess, that was a big mistake the police made. Months had passed without a sign of Shafilea, but her parents continued on with their lives like nothing ever happened. 5 months later, on February 4th, 2004, a worker at the River Kent near Sedgwick, Cumbria, saw something in the water. It looked like bones, and initially they thought it was animal bones because this river was flooded and it could have washed in from anywhere. But upon closer inspection, as they covered their noses to hide the decaying smell, they saw a gold zigzag bracelet and a blue topaz ring. Shafelea's parents were contacted to identify the jewelry found on the body, and they confirmed it was Shafelea's. An autopsy was conducted, and through dental analysis, the body in the river was confirmed to belong to 17-year-old Shafilea Ahmed. Due to the condition of the remains, the body was badly decomposed. It was in water, and the exact cause of death could not be determined. It was believed that the body had been hidden deliberately and had been in the water since September 2003. Dr. Alison Armour conducted the autopsy and stated that it was not credible that Shafilea died of natural causes. Her skull and her internal organs were missing, and the upper part of her body was extremely decomposed. It looked like she was smothered or strangled elsewhere, either manually or by a ligature. And smothering can cause very little bruising, and strangulation marks by now would be destroyed by decomposition. There were no signs of trauma or fractures to the body. The discovery of Shafelea's remains, as you can imagine, sent shockwaves through the community and confirmed the worst fears of those who suspected foul play. The remote location where her remains were found suggested that her killers had gone to great lengths to dispose of her body and evade detection. In January 2008, a coroner's inquest ruled that Shafilea had been unlawfully killed. The inquest served as a formal inquiry into the circumstances surrounding Shafelea's death, and this ruling established that her death was not accidental or due to natural causes, but rather the result of a criminal act. Her parents tried to actually overturn this ruling, but they were unsuccessful. Even with the early suspicions of the police, there wasn't enough evidence to charge anyone at this point. The case remained unsolved for several years. There was nothing else to be done, which sounds kind of impossible, but in terms of actual evidence to charge someone, everything came to a halt. The police most likely knew who Shafelea's killers were, as do you and I, but without DNA evidence, without eyewitness accounts, without anything solid, it was all just he said, she said. The breakthrough came in August 2010, and at this point, Shafelea's 4 other siblings were growing up and the family had moved on with their lives. But do you think they changed? Do you think that after Shafilea was killed, they decided, okay, you know what? Things have escalated in our family in the past. Perhaps we need to be more understanding with our remaining kids, let them make their own decisions so they can live happy lives? No. Unfortunately, Shafelea's 3 sisters were subjected to the same abuse whenever they showed any signs of rebellion. Their brother Junyad, however, never had a finger laid on him. Why? Because he was the boy. No boy deserves any punishment. Alicia in particular was quick to understand what her sister went through all those years ago. So Alicia fought back. On August 25th, 2010, close to the 7-year anniversary of Shafelea's murder, Alicia arranged an armed robbery of her parents' home. 3 armed men broke into the Ahmed home that night and stole anything of value. Farzana was at home alone with the kids and caught the men in the act. When they saw Farzana, they hit her over the head, gagged her, and tied her up. Somehow, the police arrived and arrested the men. Before they quickly confessed, they were paid by Alicia to rob her own family home. Farzana was heard screaming to Alicia, "This is down to you, you rotten bitch. You were texting all night and you opened the door to them." 22-year-old Alicia was quickly interviewed. Why on earth would she want her own home robbed? Alicia broke down and admitted everything. How her home life was suffering, how her parents were abusive, and how Alicia, together with her siblings, witnessed the murder of their own sister, Shafilea. Alicia had been living with the burden of knowing what had happened to her sister for years. She had been torn between her loyalty to her family and her desire for justice for her sister, Shafilea. She knew the truth, but she was also terrified of the consequences of speaking out against her own parents. Her parents murdered their own daughter. It became the evidence the police needed, and Alicia became the key witness to the prosecution's case. In her greatly detailed account, Alicia revealed what happened that fatal night Shafilea died. Alicia had been just 15 years old at the time of the murder and had witnessed the entire horrific event. She described how on September 11, 2003, a fight erupted between Shafilea and her parents about the Western clothes Shafilea wore. Like I said before, Shafilea would change clothes after school, and on this day, she forgot to change back into her traditional Pakistani clothes on her way home. She was wearing jeans, a lilac shirt, and a hoodie. After her shift at the call center, Shafilea began walking to the car where her mother, Farzana, was waiting for her. When Farzana saw what Shafilea was wearing, she became furious. Farzana scolded Shafilea, told her she was dishonoring the family and bringing shame for her behavior. Once they arrived home, Farzana told Iftikhar what happened. Iftikhar was 10 times more furious than Farzana. A huge fight broke out, and all the kids came downstairs to see what was happening. As the argument escalated, Farzana instructed Iftikhar to just finish it here. Iftikhar knew what that meant. As Alicia and her siblings watched, Iftikhar grabbed a plastic bag. As her mother pinned her down and her father stuffed a plastic bag into her mouth, Shafilea was suffocating to death. Alicia saw her sister's eyes wide in shock, kicking her legs as she struggled to breathe. She couldn't watch any longer. She was only 15. She ran to her bedroom, not believing her eyes. She had witnessed multiple instances of violence before, but never this. She then saw her father carry Shafilia's body wrapped in garbage bags to his car before he sped off. Farzana warned the children to never speak of what happened that day, and if anyone asked, Shafilea ran away. A friend of Shafilia's other sister, Mevish, came forward saying Mevish had told her 4 years earlier that her parents had killed her sister. Her name was Shaheen, and she said she came from a culture where she knew how to keep her mouth shut. That's just how it was. The siblings were threatened that if they ever told anyone, they would be next. On September 7th, 2011, 8 years after Shafilea's murder, her father Iftikhar and mother Farzana were arrested and charged with the murder of their daughter. The trial began in May 2012 and lasted for 10 weeks. The prosecution's case relied heavily on Alicia's testimony. She recounted the events of the murder in detail, describing how her parents had killed Shafilea in front of her and her siblings. The trial of Iftikhar and Farzana was a highly publicized and emotionally charged event. The courtroom was filled with members of the public, journalists and activists, all eager to witness the unfolding of the case. The prosecution presented a compelling narrative, piecing together the evidence gathered over the years and highlighting the inconsistencies in the defendant's statements. However, as you can imagine, the heart of the case rested on the powerful and unwavering testimony of Alicia. Over several days on the witness stand, Alicia recounted the events of that fateful night with remarkable clarity and composure. She described the chilling scene in vivid detail, recalling her parents' cold-blooded determination and Shafilea's desperate struggle for survival. It was an opportunity to expose the brutal reality of these crimes and to hold the perpetrators accountable. The prosecution's team meticulously presented the evidence, building a case that relied heavily on forensic analysis, witness testimony, and the defendant's own words. However, it was Alicia's testimony that provided the most compelling and damning evidence. Alicia was then put into a witness protection scheme and spared jail over the robbery of her family home. The youngest sister was put into foster care, and Mevish and Junyad remained loyal to their parents. Mevish denied she had ever confided in any friend about the murder. The defense denied the accusations. They argued that Alicia's testimony was unreliable and that she had been manipulated into making false accusations against her parents.
They strenuously deny any direct or indirect involvement in their daughter's untimely demise. If called upon to do so, they will not hesitate to defend their good and unblemished names in any court in this land.
However, 8 weeks into the trial, Farzana changed her story and blamed her husband for the murder of their daughter. Farzana cried on the stand and said she never wanted Shafilea hurt and tried to stop her husband Iftikhar from killing her, but he threatened to kill her if she got involved. Nobody believes you, Farzana, okay? Oh, now you want to help Shafilea? No. Iftikhar remained stone cold. Iftikhar on the stand said Farzana was lying and he had nothing to do with Shafilea's death. On August 3rd, 2012, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury found both the parents guilty of murder. They were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years each. For Shafilea's friends and supporters, it was a moment of catharsis, a validation of their long-held belief that her parents were responsible for her death. During the sentencing, the judge condemned the parents, stating, "Your concern about being shamed in your community was greater than the love of your child." That statement just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Shafilea Ahmed's murder is classified as an honor killing. These are acts of violence often resulting in death committed by family members against someone who is believed to have brought dishonor to their family. This perceived dishonor usually involves refusing an arranged marriage or behaving in a way that is seen as violating traditional family values. Honor killings are rooted in a complex web of cultural beliefs and patriarchal norms that prioritize the reputation of the family above the rights and well-being of an individual, particularly women. The concept of honor in this context is often tied to female chastity, obedience, and conformity to traditional gender roles. Any deviation from these expectations, such as refusing a forced marriage, engaging in premarital relationships, or seeking independence, getting a job can be seen as an insult to the family's reputation and a justification for violence. Honor killings are a particularly insidious form of violence because they are often perpetrated by family members, those who are supposed to be the victim's protectors. In Shafilea case, her dishonor included socializing with local British girls, having boyfriends, and refusing the arranged marriage to her own cousin. Shafilea's desire to integrate into British society, a society that her own parents put her in, to make friends and to pursue romantic, real relationships was seen by a betrayal of their cultural heritage. Her parents were so concerned about what their community would think that they were willing to kill their own daughter to maintain their social standing. My question is, though, for this to be considered regaining their honor, do they go around their community admitting that they committed murder against their own child? If it is to regain your honor, why be a coward when it comes to admitting the murder? It's a bit strange to me that they want to, regain honor in their family by getting rid of the problem. Seems to me like they couldn't control their so-called problem, so the easiest way to deal with it is to get rid of it. It doesn't seem like any honor was regained back for Shafilia's treacherous ways by killing her. It seems actually like they took the easy way out in their eyes. We can't control her, so we're going to end her. Do you guys know what I mean? Like, where is the honor regained? So what can we take away from this absolutely tragic case? Shafilea Ahmed's story is a brutal reminder of the horrors of so-called honor killings. This isn't about honor, it's about control. It's about violence, and it's about a twisted sense of shame that values reputation over human life, over the life of your own child. What could have happened differently? It's clear that there were systemic failures. Shafilea reached out for help multiple times. Social services, police, teachers, they all knew she was in distress, that she was being abused, that she feared for her life. If these specific dynamics of honor-based violence had been better understood back then, if the red flags had been recognized for the extreme danger they presented, maybe Shafilea could have been saved. Returning her to that home, trying to mediate, these were not solutions. They put her in even more danger. The murder of Shafilea Ahmed sent shockwaves through the UK. It really forced people to confront the reality that these kinds of atrocities weren't just happening in faraway countries, they were happening right there within British communities. Her case, along with others like Banaz Mahmoud, which I've covered and will link down below or up here, were a massive wake-up call. It did lead to increased awareness, more reporting of honor crimes, and thankfully some real changes. July 14th, Shafilea's birthday, is now recognized as the National Day of Remembrance for Victims of honor-based abuse in the UK. It's a day to remember Shafilea and so many others, guys, and to reinforce the commitment to fighting this kind of violence. There have been calls for and implementation of better specialized training for the police, social workers, teachers, healthcare professionals, anyone who might encounter a victim of honor-based abuse. The goal is to help them recognize the signs and respond effectively and quickly and safely. And Shafilea's case definitely contributed to the wider conversation that eventually led to forced marriage being criminalized in the UK. The reaction from Shafilea's friends was one of immense pain, but also of relief when justice was finally served. Within the British, Pakistani, and wider Muslim communities, the case did spark some introspection, hopefully. The chief executive officer of Bradford Council for Mosques publicly encouraged people to come forward with information about similar situations, but it also highlighted just how hard it is to break that code of silence that often surrounds honor-based violence, a silence born out of fear, misplaced loyalty, and that powerful grip of collective honor. Shafilea Ahmed should be remembered not just as a victim, but as a caring, high-spirited, and brave young lady. She fought for her dreams, for her independence, for the right to just be herself. Her story is a powerful, painful call to action. It demands that we stay vigilant, that we continue to fight against honor-based violence, and that we do everything we can to prevent future tragedies. Shafilea's voice, which her parents tried to silence forever, still echoes in her poetry, in the details of her struggle, and most powerfully through her sister Alicia, who found the incredible courage to speak the truth. It's up to all of us to make sure that victims of this kind of violence have safe ways to speak out, to be heard, and to be protected. What do you guys think about this case? It's a tough one, I know, but you guys know how important it is to me to share these stories, to share these specific stories. These women's voices need to be heard, whether they're here with us or not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. Please be safe out there. Look out for each other. And if you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to the resources that will be listed in the description. And I'll see you in the next one. Besitos. Bye.